So this project's only been going for a couple of years. I don't have any actual or very little data to show you, but I'll just describe the study to you. Because as Chris mentioned previously, having a traumatic brain injury seems to be a risk factor for the development of dementia. And most people think that having a traumatic brain injury increases your risk factor for the development of Alzheimer's disease. But in fact, it's not been conclusively shown that traumatic brain injury is really a risk factor for the development of Alzheimer's disease confirmed pathologically or with biomarkers. And that was the point of this study. This study is being conducted on veterans who served in the Vietnam War, which is when I served in the Air Force, who have either traumatic brain injury, post-traumatic stress disorder, or completely normal people. So the major hypothesis is that veterans with combat-associated traumatic brain injury or PTSD have an increased risk for Alzheimer's compared to their veteran controls, measured with amyloid scans or rates of atrophy of the brain or measures by changes in cognitive function. So basically, we've been able to get access. This is a completely unprecedented study. The VA gave us access to the personal records of every single veteran who served in Vietnam who had a diagnosis of traumatic brain injury or post-traumatic stress disorder, and they gave us their contact information. So we can reach out to these people by brochures, by phone calls, interview them, and see whether they're interested in serving in the study, and then we refer them to an ADNI site that is near where they live. So we're enrolling people with and without mild cognitive impairment who have had either traumatic brain injury or PTSD, or they have a skin disorder, so they're service-connected, but they don't have either, and they serve as the controls to the people with TBI and PTSD. It hasn't been easy to do this study for a number of reasons. We mailed out almost 10,000 brochures. We called, so far, over 6,000 veterans. We have a group of people who are in a phone bank. We have pre-screened 2,000 of those veterans, mailed out 500 consent forms, got back 319 consent forms, and then processed those 319 for more intense interviews, and ultimately, so far, we've enrolled 58 subjects. Our goal is to enroll 400 subjects. So we're having, you can see there's difficulty in enrolling in this study. It's a very, very intense study. It involves MRI scans and PET scans and lumbar punctures and extensive battery of tests. So you can imagine that not everybody wants to do it, and not everybody is, meets our criteria. You can see here that the biggest problem we have right at the beginning is that people say to us they're not interested. They don't want to do it, and we understand that. So we pursue the people who are interested. Then the next problem is, as you can see, a large number of them have this blue. They are MRI unsafe. There's a lot of shrapnel in the body of a lot of guys who serve in combat. So they cannot go into an MRI because they have metal, which would be attracted by the magnet. And there are other reasons why they're excluded. For example, drug and alcohol use is a common problem in people with traumatic brain injury. It's a common problem in PTSD. And people who are abusing drugs and alcohol, we can't have in our study because that kind of essentially confounds our results. So, and then there are people who don't even show up at the study. But here's what we found so far. Here we're looking at the levels of amyloid in the brain, and over there on the left, these are the levels of amyloid in the brain in the completely normal, healthy subjects. And here, this line here is what we call the upper limit of normal. So these are the normal subjects here who have high levels of amyloid similar to Alzheimer's disease. And then here, these are the normal controls in the veteran study, the PTSD subjects in the veteran study, the traumatic brain injury subjects in the veteran study, and those with both PTSD and traumatic brain injury. So you can see that for the most part, the people in the veteran study, their amyloid levels are not any higher than what we're seeing in the regular ADNI controls, with two exceptions. You see these two cases that are marked A and B. So Dr. Jagus noticed these two cases and took a look at them. And here's the first case. And what's very, very interesting, so this is an amyloid scan on a patient who served in Vietnam who had a traumatic brain injury. And what Dr. Jagus has noticed is that if you look here on this side of the brain, that the pattern of amyloid is asymmetrical. There's a lot more amyloid on this side than there is on this side. And Dr. Jagus has looked at hundreds and hundreds of these scans from the bigger ADNI study, and had never seen such striking asymmetry. So now we're wondered which side of the head this person might have had their TBI on and whether that may have influenced the development of amyloid. And similarly, the next scan also, there's considerable asymmetry with more amyloid there, as you can see on the side I'm pointing to. So this is an interesting point, but we're going to have to do a lot more subjects to find out what's going on. Now, the next thing I want to tell you is just to follow up on what both the previous speakers talked about, is the importance of tau. Because there's been a lot of interest in amyloid and measuring amyloid with PET scanning, but now there's new PET tracers to measure tau. And here we have, here's an example of a healthy control on the left who doesn't have any tau, and a patient with Alzheimer's disease who you can see has got all this red stuff on the right side of the screen, and that probably is tau. And here's another example of a healthy control in a patient with Alzheimer's disease showing a positive tau scan. And here's a series of scans on different patients from a healthy control on the left to MCI to mild AD to severe AD, showing that there's some ability to measure the various stages of tau accumulation. So this is the new hot thing in the study of Alzheimer's disease, and we've applied for funding from both the Department of Defense and the NIH to start to do tau scanning in the Alzheimer's Disease Neuroimaging Initiative. The preliminary results with tau PET are very encouraging, but probably only 100 patients worldwide have been studied. And we're going to expect an explosion of new data, and it's possible that looking at the progression of tau could be an outcome measure that would be used in clinical trials, which could potentially accelerate clinical trials. The next slide is a worldwide map of what we call the worldwide ADNI. Our success of the Alzheimer's Disease Neuroimaging Initiative in the United States led to similar studies in Australia, in Europe, in Japan, in Korea, in China, and in South America. So we now have what we call the worldwide ADNI movement. We have a meeting every year, and this has led to a whole group of clinical sites which are all using the same methods and are sharing the data worldwide, which greatly facilitates international clinical trials. So the final thing I want to talk about is this project that we've started here in San Francisco, but we hope is going to have a national or potentially even an international impact, called the Brain Health Registry. So what is the major obstacle to finding effective treatments for Alzheimer's disease? That's a very important question. In my view, the issue is not having enough compounds to study, because there are many, many promising compounds being identified to treat A-beta and tau and other things. The chemists and the biologists are developing all kinds of compounds that work on mouse models and other kinds of cell biology models. The problem is that the cost of doing human trials is what is rate limiting. It's so expensive to do a human study that it's not possible to do too many of these studies. Each company can only do 1 or 2 studies at most at a time. And there's only maybe 6 or 8 large companies that have the resources to do it. So we're very, very limited by the ability to do the human studies. The human studies are so expensive. So-called phase 3 human studies cost over $100 million apiece. So the question is, what can we do to speed up the human studies so we can get to a cure faster? And how can we reduce the cost? That's the question I keep asking myself. And it turns out that one major cost in doing human studies is simply finding people who are suitable for a trial. Just getting the people. It's just not so easy. You would think Alzheimer's is so common, why can't we just find people who can do it? But not everybody wants to be in the trial. People have exclusions. You could see from the slide I showed you about the Department of Defense study, we mailed out 9,000 brochures. We got 58 people. It's a lot of work. You have to go through a lot of screening. So what is the solution to that? Or what is an approach to that? One possibility is to establish what I call a cohort, established cohorts of trial-ready people. People who are signed up and willing to participate in the trial out of the goodness of their heart, and they think it'll be interesting. So that led to starting the Brain Health Registry. It's simply a website. It's a quite inexpensive thing to do. And it's an inexpensive thing that can grow because it can scale. And we've been working on it for a couple of years, and we only launched it a couple of months ago. It's an internet-based registry for the recruitment, assessment, and longitudinal monitoring for clinical neuroscience research. And I'm hoping you're writing this down because I'm asking each of you to sign up and then get your family and your friends and everybody you know and everybody on your Facebook, sign up on the Brain Health Registry. And I'm going to spend another couple of minutes explaining to you about this registry, why we're doing it this way, and then I really would like your feedback. If you go to the registry, there's a contact us, there's an email, or you can email me directly, because we're very interested in we're trying to understand how to make this work and how to make it simple, safe, easy, private, doesn't cost a thing, okay? It's free. The goal is to reduce the cost of Alzheimer's clinical trials. That's why we're doing it. It's an online registry for recruitment, screening, and monitoring progression. It's available to any investigator who wants to use it. So if a scientist in San Francisco or a scientist in New York wants to use this registry, they would contact us, and we will work with them to help them get subjects. That's the point of the study. If a company is doing a clinical trial, and they want us to help them find subjects for their trial, that's what it's all about. Of course, it's all approved by our institutional review board. It's all done under the University of California, San Francisco. Nonprofit. Privacy is completely protected. Don't be concerned about that. And also, there's always informed consent at every step of the way. So if people want to sign up, they can sign up. And then if we contact you or your parents or your grandparents or your friends about being in a study, if you don't want to be in a study, you say, I don't want to be in the study. Okay. So the goal is to establish a large cohort of elders who would be monitored longitudinally. Specifically, in the Bay Area, I'd like to get 50,000 people over the age of 65, healthy people or people with a little mild problem who will just sign up and then will regularly come back to the website and answer our questions and take our tests. We want to develop online tests to indicate elders who are at risk for Alzheimer's disease. That's the key, to find a way to get people to find out who's at risk. Because the